Hey y'all, Kevin here. Welcome back to my shop. So last time I was filming was 2 weeks ago, and that was what I included in the first part of Saving Patience, the episode 1. So here's what happened. I got that episode filmed. I filmed some more. Right, I got the front wheel off. I got the whole front fork assembly off, and then also in today's video I'll break down that whole front fork assembly and the vise over here. And then there seemed to be some interest in the differences from year to year, from the 15, 16, 17, 18 years, and the changes in the fork. So I'll try to get those three forks laid out on the bench here, and we can talk through that, and I'll also include that in this week's video. So Kat wants to say hi. Over here. Say hi. There you go. Yeah, so here's what happened. I filmed that video. I filmed a little more. Then I went outside to cut some firewood. Keep the shop warm, right? And you don't want to get low on firewood. Well, I tweaked my back. So the tweaked back led to setting off the arthritis in the hip, and that, so then you walk funny, and that set off the arthritis in the knee, and you know, all that. So I've been pretty much almost chair bound for a couple of weeks now. So I'm just now getting back to working on patience. So that's my story. Hope you find it interesting. Like I say, today I'll break down that fork, take it all apart, I'll lay the three forks out, we can talk about that, and we'll go from there. All right, stand by, here we go. All right, I'm trying to figure out the best way to capture this on camera. So what I've got is I've got the fork clamped in some soft jaws in the vise. I've got the vise loose so I can swivel it around. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing. Doing the best I can. I hope it works for you. All right, so what we got to do is take the fender stays off. I'm going to take this off, take the fender stays off. I take this little, now these have, you may notice these Indians have, with the leaf spring front suspension, have a two-piece fender, right? This part rides up and down with the wheel, and this part stays stationary with the fork. So we'll take these fender stays off, we'll take this part of the fender off, we'll take these fender stays off, take the back part of the fender off, then we can get the rockers off, we can take the suspension uprights off, and then take the leaf springs out of the fork. So that's the plan. Here we go. Now this thing here, a lot of people ask me, oh, where did you find that thing? You know, it's a, hopefully you can see it when I get it off, I'll give you a close-up, but it's got the old Indian Hindi Manufacturing Company, Springfield, Mass, graphic on it. And it's nothing, it's nothing big. I just, I had this old piece of copper laying in my basement. So I cut that out. It looked like, you know, all the Indians have this. Oh, there goes a nut. Under the toolbox. Then I got another one. So all of the Indians have these little mounting points on them for a front. I think overseas they put a license plate, you know, this ways across in them. You see it on British bikes and stuff. You see that on most or all of the teens Indians. So I didn't want that thing just hanging out there like that. So yeah, I took this piece of copper. I put the logo on it. I patinaed it a little bit, and I put it on there. It looks pretty good. People like it. Some people call it what is it? A pedestrian slicer, right? But don't think that's going to happen. Anyway, that's the story there. All right, so let's get these fender stays off. These are old, you know, that's original nickel on there. All I did was clean them up, straighten them out, put them back on. And they're just held on by these little clamps that go around the, there we go. You can tell that fork is sprung by the way that stuff springs loose like that. They're just held on by this little clamp right here. I put some friction tape underneath it, but that's all it is. And that holds the front half of the fender on. Now, in later years, they made a slight modification to these little front fenders because there was a hazardous situation where from time to time these little rods here that mount it to the upright would break and the front fender would drop down and the rubber of the front tire would bite into it and you'd come to a skidding stop and go over the handlebars, etc. So just speaking from experience, you don't want to go over the handlebars. So what they did is they came out with a strap that bolts on here on both sides. I don't know if you can see that, but right here and on the corresponding spot on the other side, the strap went through the spring so that if this broke right here, it would drop down, but that strap would catch on the spring and then it wouldn't bite into the tire. So that would save you. So, yeah. Interesting that they did learn from those things. I'm sure it happened to some poor unfortunate fella who was riding his Indian motorcycle. Now I don't really need to take this off, but I'm going to show you. This is a lubrication point here. This little screw comes out of this pivot, and if you wipe it off, this is, I believe, is an original piece, but if you look, I don't know if you can see that, but right above the slot in that screw, it says oil. So that's where you oil that pivot. It's got a hole here, and it's got a hole in the middle that oils the bushing. Or if you turn it upside down, it says 710. Huh. Anyway, so yeah, that goes in there. We can take the nuts loose and take the front half of the fender off. Same thing on the other side, except this side doesn't have the oiling point, it's just the one side. So let me know in the comments, you know, how you feel about this format. I mean, I've been making these videos longer than I used to, and including a lot more detail in what I'm doing. So let me know if that's interesting to you, or if if you'd rather I speed up the process and just not talk so much. So anyway, there's the front fender assembly. Back of it, this thing's bent, but we can save that. Fender stays are good, so yay. All right, now let's go ahead and take the rear fender stays off. These are already loose, and I can just leave those attached to the fender for now. I'll have to take them off because I'll have to do some body work on that fender. I've got a clip on this side that I need to take loose. Tiny one too. That's easy. So let's use the old screwdriver method. Let's see if we can spread that clip out. So yeah, tweaked my back. It ended up going into my hip, then my knee. I'll tell you, this old age thing. I'll tell you, if you're young, my recommendation to you is to take care of yourself. You know, take care of your joints, take care of your back, your feet, because I will tell you, and I'm not saying sit in a chair all your life, but I will tell you that all those little injuries from sports and, accidents and just lifting heavy things and whatnot, when you're young, they heal quick. You know, they go away the next day, that night, and it's all good. But when you get a little older, they all come back. They all come back to haunt you, and they add up. You know, they add up. You know, you think they're gone one day, and then all of a sudden you're 60, and every little bump and bruise you ever had comes back. I'm having a heck of a time with this clip. I actually have the correct clip pliers, and they're out in my moto van right now, and I don't feel like walking out there to get them. So there, see? It's off. All else fails, pocket knife, right? Okay, so let's take that nut off. Take the other fender stay loose. This one needs to match. Yeah, see, everything's still in a bind, everything's bent, so it's like a spring. It's like a coiled up spring. Everything I've taken off of this thing has been crooked and in a bind and ready to fly across the room. So just gotta take it easy. There we go. Stays off. Just going to put the nut on loosely for now because we'll have to take that pivot off. Now, these bottom fenders are interesting. They just have these two fender stays, and then they have two screws. Let's see, can you see there? Up in here, these two screws, right? Which goes up into the lower retaining plate for the leaf spring, right? And they're countersunk, but they also fit in a slot. It's an interesting design I've never seen anywhere before, but we'll have to get a socket and take those two nuts off. A small socket, let's see what we've got. That'll be 5/16, huh? No? There's a nice long extension, little bitty ratchet, 3/8 socket. And just take those loose. Now this bike, you know, was mostly disassembled when I got it, but the first time I took this fender off, there were some spring washers on these, under these nuts, and that's not correct. They just, I believe, had a flat washer or no washer at all originally. So, and they were an interesting. All right, fender's off. And they were an interesting washer. They were a spring washer, but they were helical, flat helical washer. And you, as far as I know, you can't, I have never been able to find those commercially. And what they are is they are originally for the pivot for the control linkages. So right here, those, it took me a while to figure out, but those helical washers were to fit underneath that linkage right there to take up the clearance. And I've got some wavy washers in there now. But so when I figured that out, I took the washers that were under there, which should have been over there, and I put them where they should be, right? And I didn't use enough Loctite on the nut. Long story short, that old linkage came apart during the 16 Cannonball, and I lost those two original helical spring washers. And they're like, I think they're the only ones I've ever seen like that. So dang, you know. Okay, fender's off. Let's take the rockers off. So you see the way the suspension works. It's got a rocker here. The wheel axle goes through there. Oh, let me do that part again. Okay. So you see the way this rocker works, the way this front suspension works. These uprights go up to the spring. The axle of the wheel goes right here, basically right below the pivot point of that upright, okay? So it pivots on the stationary part of the fork. When you hit a bump, it pushes up on this upright, deflects the spring. That's your suspension. So, let me back you up here so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so let's go ahead and take the top pivot apart. Good size. other interesting thing is these little rubber bumpers. And what that does is it keeps the can you see that? It keeps the this coiled part of the spring from completely closing up, right? And because if you deflect that too far, you could potentially break it. And I'm sure that probably happened, and that's probably why they started making them that way. Yeah, so everything's so bad, it's a little bit difficult to get apart, but there's the rubber piece. There's the rubber piece I was talking about. And it just it just sits in there like that. And it's sandwiched by both of the uprights. So this is the rocker. You can see that. So that's how it works. This is a grease cup. So you screw that off. You know, every once in a while, once a week, once a month, depending on how much you ride. You screw that cup off, you fill it with grease. You see it's got some green John Deere cornhead grease in there. And then you screw it back on. And you screw it down, it's got clicks. Right? It's got a little spring in there that clicks. And you screw it on until you see some grease coming out around the pivot, and then you stop. And then after you ride for a while, you might give it another click and put a little more grease in there, so forth. So, interesting process. Just going to leave that on there for now. Put that on. There we go. This is the lower pivot. I'll put the nuts back on that. And there we go. Everything greasy and grimy the way we want it. Okay. Now you can see, if I pivot the vise around, I believe you can see how the spring's held on. Hopefully you've got enough light there to see that. I believe so. So all we got to do is take these 4 nuts off, and the spring will come loose, and the fork assembly will be free. All right, I'll put these out of the way. So yeah, the weather's been crazy here. I don't know how it's been where you are. It's actually been a pretty easy winter for us. We've had a couple of little snows, but I've only had to plow once really. One big one and maybe one small one. As opposed to last year where it was every other day for a long time we were plowing snow. So you know, it was that kind of deal where you would have a day of plowing, or you'd have a day of snow and you'd spend the next day plowing. And then you'd have another day or two of snow, and then another day of plowing, You just never got ahead of it, you know. That seems like it went on for all winter last year. I'm sure I remember it worse than it really was. But that's the way it seemed. That's the way it seemed. This year, we've got a little bit of snow, but mild temperatures. It's supposed to be in the 40s and 50s pretty much all the next week. So, not complaining about that. I like the seasons, but the snow gets old. So yeah, after the last video, I got some calls and emails from people. One from my friend Gene. He said, "Boy," he said, I sure appreciate you making those videos, but I don't know how you do that, you know? It takes so much time." I said, "Yeah, it does. It really does. I mean, everything you do takes twice as long, and then you got to go edit it." Boy, that sucker's tight, which is a good thing. And then you got to go edit it, which takes even longer than doing the work. And you get tired of looking at yourself on the camera all the time, and you know, you wonder if you're doing it right or if you're doing what people want to see. And but I told them I don't know why I like doing these videos, but I do. So you know, and it all started when I started. Well, that's not where it all started. You know, I've had a website since, I think, the early 90s, mid 90s, you know, when my kids were in school. And they came home and they said, "We learned how to make a website in school." I said, "Okay, show me," you know. So I had my internet service provider as part of my monthly deal. Got a certain amount of space on their saver where you could build a website, you know. So me and the kids built a website. Now I'm trying here not to repeat the fender drop. So if I drop this spring, don't let it scare you. It happens. So what's going to happen is this plate right here comes loose, and then behind that the spring. And of course, springs are called springs because they spring. So I'm trying to keep a hold of everything, as well as holding the bolt while I turn the nut. All right. All right, that stayed in socket. All right, so here's that plate to hold the spring on. Now, let me take this. The spring's going to stay for me. So now let me show you. These are the two bolts that hold that front fender on, the back part of it. You can see it's flat on the back. Can you see that? They're countersunk flat. And if you take these screws out, you see there's a little slot in the countersink. And there's corresponding little, there you go, little bumps on the countersunk screw head. It doesn't have any kind of screwdriver slot or anything because you couldn't get a screwdriver on it. It's up against the spring, but the spring holds it in this slot. So, and then it can't turn when you tighten the nut. So I thought that was clever. And you know, I want to show you that kind of stuff because if you ever buy a basket case Indian like I did, and you find those in a box, and you wonder what the heck is this, you know, and you put them off to the side, and then might be a year later you're putting the front suspension together, and you're like, well, how the heck am I supposed to get a screwdriver on those two little countersunk screws, you know? And so hopefully seeing this video might help somebody make a light bulb go on in their head. and save them some time. All right, so there's the spring pack. Let's turn it around over here. There's the spring pack consisting of 5 leaves. Now this one has 5 leaves. This is this bottom one. See the inner one in the loop here? That's an extra reinforcing leaf. So years ago they had a problem where, you know, it just had the one leaf in the loop, and they would eventually fatigue and crack across here, and your suspension would collapse. All right, so there were 2 fixes developed for that. One was a big rubber piece that filled the loop and kept it from collapsing all the way. The other was that, well, I guess there was 3 things. There was the big rubber donut that goes in there. There was the little rubber piece that I showed you earlier that went in here, right? This one here slides right in there, and it's held in place by the uprights. Okay, and then the other thing they came up with was this reinforcing leaf, an extra leaf that goes inside that loop. Now when you use that extra reinforcing leaf, there isn't room for the rubber donut, so it's kind of a one or the other kind of thing. And me being a big guy, I decided the extra leaf was a good idea, so you know, I put that in there. Now, I got something else I want to show you. Well, I got these leaves out here. I'm going to set this on the bench. I'm going to turn the camera around where you can see it. I should have done this, you know, while it was on the bike, but didn't think of it. But I have this tool. I can't remember if I bought this on eBay or at a swap meet, but this is the only one I've ever seen. I'm sure there are a million of them out there, but this is the only one I've ever seen. And look at it. It's like perfect nickel. You know, I don't know. It's got a W on it that kind of looks like the Williams tool emblem, but I don't know if that's who made it. And it's got a patent number on it there. So, guess what that does? When this spring pack is all mounted up on your front suspension, you can't oil or grease between the leaves, right? And so they'll start to squeak. So this little tool you put right on there, and it's got these little wedges, right? And you tighten it up like a clamp, and it wedges those apart, and then you can lubricate them. You can get some grease or oil or something in between them so they don't squeak, so they slide. So I should probably do that in my cool old tools series, but yeah, that's what that is. Looks like it was hardly ever used. I mean, you know, you can see it was used because there's a little nickel gone right there, and maybe some little dents right there where it was used, but for the bulk of it, you know, the nickel's intact. Looks really good. So, fun thing. Okay, there we are. We've got the fork loose. We've got these 4 bolts to take out. But essentially, that's the disassembly of the fork. Next, I'll lay them out on the bench with the 1819 fork, the 17 fork, and this modified 16 fork, and then I also have a correct 16 fork. This is a modified 17 fork made to look like a 16 fork that somebody did years ago. Okay, that's it for today. Thanks for watching. If you like the video, hit that like button and subscribe. Share with your friends.